All right, let's talk about that now. Retired Air Force Special Operations Commander Major Glenn Ignacio is our first guest this hour. Iran on our mind here as we begin the new week, Glenn. So, the Iranians, it's interesting the way things are being put in public versus what might be happening behind the scenes. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, says there's a difference. What do you think is really going on?
Yeah, I think that the protesters are just really rising up to such a significant level. But at the same time, the shutdown is because there is a brutal regime response as we see a lot of dead. So as we talked about last week, the shutdown on the internet was either one, to break the coordination of the protesters, or two, was that mean Iran was going to be doing something brutal? In all honesty, I think it's happening to be both right now.
The question then is, what, from an American point of view, does President Trump do about it in the short term? Question came up to the president about a red line. Here it is. Take a listen.
They're on Iran. Have they crossed your red line yet?
Well, no, they're starting to, it looks like, and there seem to be some people killed that aren't supposed to be killed. These are violent, if you call them leaders, I don't know if they're leaders or just they rule through violence. But we're looking at it very seriously. The military is looking at it, and we're looking at some very strong options.
Strong options, such as, the president's talked about really hitting Iran where it hurts. What might that mean specifically in your view?
From a cyber perspective, it would be shutting down the IRGC and their coordination as far as how they're gathering together to do whatever they do brutally against protesters. That red line was people being killed, but we're seeing it from 80 to now in the hundreds, possibly into the thousands. So I think that red line has been crossed. But again, back to the military, you're talking about hitting the IRGC, both from the coordination standpoint, but also in capabilities that are using weapons, organization, et cetera, against the protesters. So the more that they can be disrupted and broken up as far as organized, the better. So I could see the strikes that would be more towards that, and any other military that would be beneficial for everybody in the area.
What about the risks of that? We have a lot of U.S. assets, of course, in the region, in the Middle East. There's been talk that the Iranians might try something preemptive, knowing, last time around there was talk of talks, and the U.S. struck in a big way that Iran might try to get out ahead of that. Do they have the capability to do so? What are the risks on our end?
I think from the country itself of Iran, I think that's limited. As we've seen the particular words come from President Trump, and they are becoming action. I think that the proxies, as far as the Houthis and others, would be more, I think, positioned to do something that would catch us off guard. So I don't see too much really come from Iran. They were devastated. We know the whole system based on the last attacks. So I would see more coming from the proxies from Iran, if anything whatsoever. But we do have to worry is that if we do something within country, that we don't basically galvanize everybody to say, hey, we're against the United States. Now, that's always a precaution. Hopefully it doesn't happen in any way, shape, or form, but we do have to be concerned about that.
You expect, there's probabilities you could put on outcomes on this. And one is, what's the probability of military action? And then last week we started a conversation with some experts. What's the probability of the Iranian regime actually falling as a result, not necessarily directly of that military action, but of other events that might transpire over the next however many weeks and months? So how do you look at this in terms of the odds of what's next?
I think the next steps that really would pivot to, say, regime change is, well, it's already an armed situation with unarmed individual, which is the protesters. The longer this goes on, the more negative for the protesters. And here's why, is that the protesters have to be very organized across the multiple cities. They have to have individuals that are tied to the unions of transportation and all those to be able to suppress things. Economically, that would impact it, where now members of the IRGC, our law enforcement and so forth that are brutal against them are actually impacted because they're not being paid, and they come to the sides of the protesters. And then lastly, there has to be somebody that is rising up, that is going to be the person that is going to pull this all together and say, be the change of the regime. Who is going to replace Khomeini? If not, it can be very dangerous when we start getting into, I hate to say it, a revolution, civil war, where you get these vacuums and these other factions. We don't want to get there. So organization impacting multiple unions, transportation, infrastructure, makes it last a long time, and try to get IRGC and law enforcement on their side, because they're suffering as well.
Do you feel that last point about someone being ready to rise up and take the place of the Ayatollah is in place? And what would you say about stability in Iran? You know, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves, but if this does start to happen and happen quickly, what could it actually look like? I think one of the observations that have been made about the protesters this time around is that there have been more of them. It's not just in the big cities, not just the college educated. It's, you know, it's coming because I think of economic concerns from the middle class and from the lower classes in Iran, that there's a wider cross section. Does that matter? And then to your second point, your other point about someone rising up and being ready to take over.
Yeah, both good points. The coordination, like I said, across many cities, it is quite different. The economic problem has impacted so many people across so many different demographics. So it is different. But again, without that coordination, without somebody rising up, which is to the next question, is we have the Shah's son within the United States that is saying,
Right.
hey, taking this particular position. But how does he get in? How does he get in safely? And is there another person that may be rising up in country? Now, who is going to be that individual that they rally against is what's going to make the difference. Who that will be yet, I don't know. I don't know what the mechanics would be to get the Shah in safely, the Shah's son, or
Right.
who is becoming prominent to rise up. Again, they have to sustain this long term. Otherwise, it goes to the regime's brutality to be able to do that. So the longer it goes, they have to build, the protesters have to build some survival mechanism to keep them going.
But to go
So
back
very
to the
dynamic.
beginning, you think, or starting to feel to use of Trump's, something's coming here from the U.S.
Yeah, as Trump said, hey, look, I may be striking before we negotiate. Probable, and that would help the protesters because when we talks about the negotiations, who's not at the table? The protesters. Again, no real leader that's going to step up. So if there is a negotiation, it's going to be, unfortunately, alleviating certain pressures. That's sanctions, making Iran drop the nuclear. What do they get in return for that negotiation? And that probably doesn't support the protesters because, again, they're not at the table. We want them to be able to take over the country and be free again.
All right, Glenn, as always, we appreciate your analysis, Major Glenn Ignacio.